We're here filming at the headquarters for Hearing Dogs for Deaf People. Hearing Dogs for Deaf People is a fantastic charity that trains dogs to alert their recipients to sounds that otherwise they would miss, such as doorbells or smoke alarms. But more than that, these dogs help give their recipients a sense of independence and combat the stresses and anxieties that they can so often suffer. Separation-related behaviour problems, or separation anxiety as it's more commonly known, is a really distressing condition in dogs, which is almost similar to a full-blown human panic attack. The severity of these attacks and the symptoms that each individual dog shows is different, but they all have the same cause. Dogs, by their very natures, bond closely to their owners, and unless they're taught that being left on their own is safe, when they're left home alone, they can feel that fear that so easily turns to high anxiety and panic. There are many symptoms of separation anxiety, with some dogs showing only one or two of them and others showing most of them. These include barking and whining, howling, loss of toilet training, destruction, salivation, self-mutilation and even aggression. But they're all just symptoms of the dog's fear. This is bad for the owner because of expensive damage, neighbour complaints and vet's bills, but it's an absolute disaster for the dog, who ends up living in an almost permanent state of stress because he never knows when he's going to be left and feeling that fear when he is. No matter how frustrated owners might get, it's important that they remember that the dog isn't doing this intentionally. He's not doing it out of spite at being left or because he's angry at you leaving. It comes from fear. He's so panicked at being left that he can't control himself, no matter how mild or severe those symptoms are. The reality is that there's no quick or easy fix to separation anxiety. It takes time and patience to cure. The good news, though, is that what a lot of people think of as separation anxiety is quite often something else entirely. And while separation anxiety is very difficult to cure, it's incredibly easy to prevent.
Hi Carolyn, I was wondering whether I could pick your brains a little bit about separation anxiety, because I had clients come to me when I was in practice and they decided themselves that their dog had separation anxiety because it was barking at home. But from what else they said, I wasn't always convinced that it was separation anxiety. What do you think?
Well, first of all, dogs don't just bark when you leave them because they've got separation anxiety. Sometimes it's just that they're being left too long, that they're frustrated and bored, or that they're under-exercised. If dogs are bored and there's things lying around, then quite often they'll just pick them up and chew them. That isn't the same sort of destruction that you get in separation anxiety. Loss of toilet training. Quite often that's not separation anxiety, it's just that the dog hasn't been toilet trained properly, or the owner's expecting them to hang on for too long. So quite often it's misdiagnosed, especially when it's done by the owners themselves.
So what things can owners be looking out for if they're worried about what their dog's doing when they're away, to decide whether it is something else or whether it is separation anxiety?
Separation anxiety, we've got to remember that they come from fear, and so what you see is really quite different in a separation anxiety. So the barking and whining, or even the howling, will pretty much go on constantly. They'll probably lose their toilet training a lot of the time when you're away, and sometimes that also includes diarrhoea because there's stress, there's adrenaline, the dogs are really worried. The destruction tends to be quite extreme, quite random. You'll tend to find the dog digging at the door, so you'll quite often see scratches at the door. And you can also see things like self-mutilation. They get so stressed they'll start to chew their paws and chew their legs, and quite often to make quite a serious mess of themselves. And then when you come back, they're so pleased to see you and they don't settle for ages. I think the first one is whether your dog's getting enough exercise. Nearly all behaviour problems can be, if not cured, certainly improved if the dog's getting enough exercise. A tired dog is much more likely to relax and just sleep when the owners are out. And it's not just physical exercise, it's mental exercise as well. Quite often it's leaving interactive toys and games with your dog when you leave him, so that he's got things to keep his mind occupied. That means he's much more likely to just relax and just settle when you leave him.
I agree, exercise is so important. But what happens if owners are out a lot of the day with work and that they physically can't do exercise with their dogs?
Well, I mean, as much as possible, they need to get the dog out before they go to work. If they can come home at lunchtime to take the dog out, that's great. When they come home from work, yeah, I know they're going to be tired and exhausted, but get the dog out. And if you can't, then you can always find dog walking services or get a neighbour to pop in, even just to let your dog out in the garden, have a game with them, just break up the day and just sort of, stop the boredom more than anything else.
So there are ways around it then, really,
Always.
aren't there? So then another thing is, we talked about, is toilet training as well. So if they're unfortunately soiling in the house, how can we tackle that, or have a look and see if we think that's the issue rather than actual separation anxiety?
Again, going right back to the beginning and just looking at your toilet training, just making sure that your dog's reliable at all times, that again, he's exercised, so he's had a chance to go to the toilet before you leave him. Make sure you do take him out and give him a chance to empty himself before he goes. Try not to leave him for too long. Dogs can't hang on for that length of time. And again, get someone to pop in and let him out if you think you're going to be longer than you expect.
And chewing, I know chewing can be a real issue. People have bits of furniture destroyed. Is chewing actually separation anxiety?
Well, I mean, first of all, quite often people just let their dogs have the sort of the run of the whole house when they leave them. So there's loads of things lying around, there's slippers and shoes and toys and remote controls and loads of things that the dog can chew. So first of all is decide where you want him to stay, and then just tidy up. Tidy up all your things, like all your shoes, anything that's lying around. But remember that dogs enjoy chewing. Kongs are fantastic toys. You can stuff them full of food, make sure they're the right size, and leave them so that if your dog finds them, he can have a chew of those. And chewing sort of calms dogs down and makes them feel great as well. So it's not so much a case of how do I stop my dog chewing, it's how do I just give him things that are appropriate for him to chew.
So if we think about restricting the area that the dog has access to in the house, which parts of the house are better to restrict them to?
Well, ideally the place where the dog spends most of his time anyway, because that's where he's going to be the most comfortable and feel the most relaxed. But we have to make sure that it's somewhere that's fairly quiet as well. So if you've got constant disruption, people walking up and down outside, or noises from next door, or your dog can see movements, quite often that means that he won't necessarily settle as well. So it's finding a combination of somewhere that's going to be nice and quiet, that the dog's comfortable in. And if you spend a lot of time in the house with your radio and television on so that there's constantly noise in the house, then a room where you can just leave a television or radio on when you leave your dog, so there's not such a big gap between you being there and not being there. We're really lucky now though, because technology has come on so far. Nearly all computers have got webcams, or you can buy webcams really cheaply and set them up. Even technological idiots like me can set up a webcam. And so you can leave a webcam on your dog, and so you can tell whether or not it's just boredom, chewing and a little bit of woofing, or whether he really has the symptoms of separation anxiety. Right back at the very beginning, before you even get your dog, you need to get your dog somewhere from a breeder who does a really good socialisation and habituation plan, like the puppy plan. In other words, that teaches the puppies that being alone is fine and safe. Because that's all separation anxiety is. Dogs just don't think that it's safe to be left on their own. So if right at the beginning, when they're these tiny squidgy little balls who think everything's new, so everything is just like, oh, so that's what life's about, okay. And so if at that point you can teach them being on your own's fun, there'll still be nice stuff, there'll still be treats and games, and then, everybody will be back together, then it's not something that becomes a great fear. So you need to first of all just make sure you go to a breeder who really prioritises this and understands it, especially if it's in the sort of breeder type who's really prone to separation anxieties. Or if you want to get an adult dog from a rescue centre, unless you're in all day and you can spend some time working with them, check that this is a dog that's been used to being left alone and that's happy being left alone.
Okay, so what do you think we should do when we first bring our puppy or dog into our homes? I'm sure there's something we should be doing right from the beginning.
Absolutely, because quite often we almost encourage separation anxieties because we get our puppy home and they're gorgeous and they're lovely and we love them and we think it's fantastic that our little puppy wants to follow us everywhere and be with us all the time. But what we're not teaching them how to do is how to cope when we're not there. So from the very, very beginning, you have to say, there's times when you can't follow me everywhere. So, if I'm going to go to the toilet, quite honestly, you're going to stay there. I'll leave you with a treat and a toy so that you know that being left's still fun, but you don't always get to follow me. When you're giving your puppy his dinner, sometimes put his dinner down one side of a baby gate and go and sit on the other side, just so that he knows that he doesn't always have access to you, and that's fine. His world doesn't stop when you're not there. You're just starting to proof him to realise that being on your own is safe. It's not scary.
That's great advice, but what happens when we need to leave them at home and we've got to go actually out of the house?
Well, the first thing is to remember to practice first. The first time you leave the house shouldn't be like, oh God, I've got to go up for 6 hours, because no wonder that's going to make your dog go, what on earth's just happened? It just becomes a natural extension of the, you've left to go to the bathroom, you've left to go to the toilet, then maybe you'll leave to walk down to the bottom of the drive and come back, or you'll leave to walk up the garden and come back. So the dog gets used to you also leaving the house, shutting the door, all of those kind of things, and then you can start to build up the length of time that you stay out. But it's something you need to practice before you have to do it. Okay. So just set up situations, invent situations where you just walk to the end of the road and back, just so your dog slowly gets used to periods of your absence, and then you can start to build those up. Another thing that people don't think about is separation anxiety quite often comes from a lack of confidence. So do lots of things to build your dog's confidence. So when they're young, playing lots of games where they have to go away from you and come back. And then when they start to become older, going to training classes so they learn to do waits and stays and sendaways and do things that's at a distance from you, so that they get to know that being away from you is fine, it's good, it's rewarding, and all of those kind of things, just to build the dog's confidence.
So I suppose Adaptil fits in there really well then, because it's a copy of the dog appeasing pheromone that the mother releases a few days after she's given birth to her puppies to help them feel comforted and secure. So popping an Adaptil diffuser near to where they're spending their time will help them too.
It's absolutely brilliant, because separation anxieties, or preventing separation anxieties, is all about building confidence and lessening stress, and of course Adaptil's perfect for that.
So would you use an Adaptil diffuser in the room that you've decided to leave your dog in when you go out of the house?
Well, chances are you're probably using the Adaptil diffuser in that area anyway, because that's the area that your puppy's spending most of his time, or your new dog's spending most of his time. So they're going to have that pheromone just sort of percolating around the house. And you've always got the spray that you could spray on the vet bed or the bedding in whatever area that you're using. I think it's just really important that from the minute somebody gets their puppy or their dog, they just start to practice these periods of the puppy being on their own. There's going to be times that we're going to have to leave them. And it's really important that they learn that just this isn't scary, it isn't frightening, that we use all the tools that we've got to make sure they're happy being left.
So if we're in the unfortunate situation that we videoed our dog while we're not at home and found that there is signs of separation anxiety there, and yet we're still doing lots of exercise, we've left some toys, what can we do next?
Well, the first thing we have to do is look at the symptoms that the dog's showing and decide whether the separation anxiety can be classified as mild, moderate or severe. So in cases of mild separation anxieties, owners may be able to deal with that on their own. But with moderate and severe cases, they're definitely going to need professional help, and the dog may even need pharmacological intervention. But even with mild cases, there are no quick fixes. Owners need to be aware that it still takes time and effort and commitment. As we said earlier, prevention is always better than cure, and owners mustn't think that the dog will just get used to being left on their own, because actually without treatment, they're just going to keep getting worse.
Earlier you mentioned about some breeds being more prone to separation anxiety. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit more.
Yeah, any time we're looking at behaviour problems or potential behaviour problems, it helps if we look at what dogs were originally bred to do. So first of all, we've got companion breeds. So dogs that we've intentionally bred because they want to be with us. That's why they make such great companions. They bond really closely to us. So for them, it can be really, really difficult when they're not with us. So these breeds can be really prone to separation anxieties, as can breeds who are designed to work really, really closely with an owner and a handler. So some of the working breeds, some of the pastoral breeds, some of these dogs who it's really important for them to work really closely with someone, so they make really strong, really tight bonds. Sometimes this can happen with rescue dogs because they've had really unsettled starts. They come into a home and suddenly they've just found this fantastic person that's going to care for them, and they bond really tightly and really closely. And in other cases it can happen if maybe you've moved house or there's been big changes in your dog's life. I said earlier, it's quite often dogs that have a loss of confidence that can have separation anxieties, and sometimes these can happen because of external events.
So why is separation anxiety so difficult to treat?
Well, it is really quite hard for the owners just to follow the procedures that they're going to need to, because while you're working on separation anxiety, you can't leave the dog at all, ever. At the moment, every time the owners leave, the dog's filled with panic, and you can't leave him until you've actually taught him that being on his own is safe, until he believes that he can cope when he's home alone. If you leave and he's filled with all that separation anxiety and fear, he's just going to be convinced that every time you go, it's just a really, really scary thing. So you have to do it in such slow steps so the dog is actually happy with each point of the procedure, and this can take a really long time.
But that can be quite difficult then if you really have got to leave the house.
It does mean that you either have to take your dog with you when you go places. That might be taking your dog to work, or it's getting neighbours to sit with your dogs. Or quite often if you get on the internet, you can find other people who have dogs with separation anxieties, and you can do joint doggy daycare, or you can just use a general doggy daycare. In mild separation anxieties, the dog's quite happy if he's with anyone. With moderate and severe cases, it has to be their particular owner, which is why it's easier for owners to treat mild cases. So it's just finding ways round not having to leave your dog alone, but I know that's really hard.
What's the first step for an owner to take?
Well, with your mild separation anxieties, the first thing to look at is all the things that we just talked about prevention, because they'll find that the dog follows them around all the time, can't be apart from them. So it's teaching them that little absences in the house to start with are safe. And quite often owners feel this is a bit of a waste of time, but unless you do all this lot first, then you're not going to be able to work further up the programme. So find a nice comfortable place that your dog's going to be. Best place is probably in the room that he spends most of his time anyway. Set up a puppy pen or some baby gates so he can't necessarily follow you all the time. And the most important thing is, first of all, make sure he's happy there. So if you're using a puppy pen, spend some time just when you're watching television with him beside you in the puppy pen and just giving him treats or playing games. If you're using baby gates, then exactly the same thing. Make sure he's happy for you to sit on the other side of the baby gate from him, just so that he's really comfortable and secure with this long before you even think about leaving him or walking away from him. If you watch many dogs with separation anxiety, you'll see that around the home, they almost have to be touching their owners all the time. So the very first step of using the pen is just to get the dog used to the fact that he can't always have constant contact with the owner. So the owner's not having to go far away from them, literally just have them so that they're just not quite touching. And then you start to build up moving away from the dog. And to start with, this has to be tiny distances for a very, very, very short time. So literally you just give them a treat, take 2 or 3 steps, come back and just pretend nothing exciting's happened until you can build it. You can go maybe a little bit out of sight just for 10 seconds, 20 seconds. And from there you can then slowly start to build into having little absences of going to the toilet. If you've got a dog with separation anxiety, going to the toilet and coming back is a really, really big thing. That is a cause for breaking open the champagne, let me tell you. And it's only then you can then start to do the maybe just go outside the door, but don't shut it, because shutting the door is a big thing, and come back. And then go out for a bit longer and come back, and then maybe close the door over. And just think of all those things that you do when you leave, because if a dog's got separation anxiety, he starts to get worried long before you go. As soon as he sees you picking up your shoes, he kind of knows. So if you pick up your shoes every time you go out, maybe don't. Maybe go out in your socks, so that you're just lessening the anxiety all the time. Or maybe put your shoes on and then just sit in the house, so that putting your shoes on doesn't always mean, she's going to go out and my world's going to end. Start thinking of all the things that you do and do them at other times. If you pick up your door keys when you go out, then pick up your door keys, give him his dinner and put your door keys back down again, and just break up the routine as well, so that the dog just doesn't get into that state of anxiety. But all the time you're just working in tiny, tiny increments, just keeping the dog calm, keeping the dog happy, giving him the skills to go, you know what, they can go away and it's all right. My world doesn't end. But that really, really doesn't happen overnight.
I think the biggest message I'm getting from what you said there is take it slow, don't rush.
Absolutely. You can't rush any step at all. And if at any point you look at your dog and think, he's getting stressed and I'm not sure I'm on the right lines, then just get professional help. Call in a behaviourist. Don't try and do it on your own. Because if the dog slips back over, he'll genuinely believe that he was right to be scared about you going, that it is really, really worrying, and he'll just almost get worse. So you need to take it really slowly and just get professional help. Get back up if you need it.
So if we do need behavioural help, how do we find it?
Well, it's really important that owners find a qualified, experienced behaviourist who understands about treating separation anxiety. Not all behaviourists can or do because, as I said earlier, it's quite a complex case to treat and owners need an awful lot of support. It's not the sort of case that you can just turn up, give them a few things to do and vanish. Because it takes quite a long time, they're going to need behavioural support all the way through. So it needs a behaviourist who enjoys working with these kind of cases. And also, obviously, somebody who's going to work in conjunction with their vet.
Yeah, it's very important that, because we need to make sure there's nothing medically wrong with the dogs, just in case we do need to have some pharmacological intervention in there.
That's actually a really, really good point, because if a separation anxiety happens suddenly, if you've got a dog who's been completely fine and then suddenly something happens, it's worth getting a vet check anyway, because there could be some kind of clinical condition rather than necessarily a behavioural one. When it comes to separation anxiety, though, prevention is always better than cure. And separation anxiety is one of the hardest problems we ever have to deal with. There's no quick fixes, there's no easy solutions. It just requires time and effort and endless patience and nearly always professional help. But the good news is prevention is really, really easy.
Because separation anxieties are so difficult to cure, we all as professionals need to be thinking far more about prevention. So anyone in any professional capacity, so vets, vet nurses, groomers, should be helping to prevent this problem. So we need to be empowering professionals to say, you know what, we can stop this problem long before it even starts.